Telkom Business, behind South African businesses' drive to thrive.
Welcome to this week's special edition of the Entrepreneurial SME with me, Mabote. This year's groundbreaking events such as the national budget and the State of the Nation address have raised concerns about the overall future for SMEs in South Africa. What is going to be the impact on the small businesses from these two speeches? Joining me for this one-hour panel discussion to help us make sense of all of this, including the changing landscape brought by the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is Sibusiso Ngwenya, Managing Executive at Telkom Financial Services, the CEO of Small Business Institute, Dludlu, and joining us on Zoom is the Chief Investment Officer of Business Partners Limited, Jeremy Lang. Gentlemen, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to start with you, Sbu. And thank you very much, by the way, for joining us. The main actors in this space, the President and the Minister of Finance, talk to us about this hopeful thing. The President calls it, the SMEs are the lifeline of the economy, right? I have a cynical question to start with. And my question is, I've heard this before. Is this a song that's going to break at some point?
Well, thanks for the question, Rem. I think there is truth to the statement, right? Small businesses are a potential lifeline for the economy. Our unemployment rates, as you know, are in 33% now, and fundamentally we need a lot of people to have an entrepreneurial mindset to go out there and start a business. Now, what's the role of government in this? Fundamentally, the role of government is to create an environment that is conducive for us to do exactly that. And
I'm going to get to that later because that environment is my bane of contention. John, you work with SMEs. You call yourself a beggar for money for SMEs. And you would know international trends. Do we match up with the importance and the space that SMEs play in terms of the economy? Do we match up with the world?
No, we don't. We're an outlier economy, actually, as far as SMEs are concerned. So we have about 3 documents. 1995 white paper on small business, which became the Small Business Act. And then the second one is the National Development Plan. And then, of course, there's now a new iteration, which is the National Integrated Small Enterprise Development Plan, Master Plan. All these documents talk to the aspiration that we should be like other progressive economies. In other words, most jobs must come from the small business segment of the economy. Where are we now? In most successful economies, whether it's Japan, Germany, and America, it's in the order of 60 to 70% of jobs are contributed to by the small businesses in those countries. In our country, in a study we did in 2017-18, before COVID and before other underlying conditions, we found that formally employing SARS registered, CIPC registered, UIF registered small businesses, although they make up 98% of all formally registered companies, they only contribute 28%. Of course, this stripped out the gig economy, freelancers, and then the informal sector economy, which I think has helped us avert as an economy a humanitarian disaster of unemployment.
Jeremy, let me bring you in here. John says 28% is what we compare with the world that is on 60-70%. I mean, that's just scary. When I look at your annual reports and I look at your PR work at your organization, the Business Partners, Jeremy, it always looks beautiful. I see these amazing stories. Are you the guys that represent this 28% and the rest is outside the loop?
Yeah, the SME sector is actually more complex than most people make it out to be, because we combine it into one element, but it actually consists of informal, formal, even into the larger medium cap businesses. So I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I also want to add that if you compare us to other countries, some of them have been mentioned, our SMEs can do more to contribute to this country. However, we do need to make it an environment in which they can thrive. And I think we can do a lot more there from both the private and public sector to create this environment in which they can thrive, make it easy for them to operate, make it easy for them to conduct business. We have very, very complex pieces of legislation, taxes, all of those kinds of things that really makes it difficult for them to do. I say, let them focus on what they do best, innovate and create.
You touching me on my studio, as they say, Jeremy, and I'll tell you I get personal on this one. Recently asked by a government institute to do some work for them, and the work that they were going to pay me for, the payment was 30% of the amount of work I was going to put in for compliance compared to what I would have done for a private company. And I thought, but guys, you should be able to check the tax clearance without me having to go through it. But let's not get personal. You spoke about the conducive environment. Should it? People argue that people who govern us don't know the environments in which they govern. I don't necessarily believe that politicians should be expert in what they do because they have people underneath them. But it does bother me, Sbu. It does bother me to have a situation where SMEs have to go through legislative framework that is completely disarming them to do what they can do. Could it be done better? People are asked, a friend of mine was asked to do a job for a government department and they needed his matric certificate. He's a consultant in something completely different. Why do you need a matric certificate?
Yeah, I'm not the one to answer that one since I don't work for the government, right, or the institution.
I'm asking you how we can do it better.
Yes, 100%. And I think I would tend to agree with you, right? The regulatory red tape out there for small business is more than what is needed. It really is. We have got to simplify that because ultimately, if I'm a small business, one of the things that I certainly don't have is capacity to do things that are outside of running the core business of my small business.
And that includes just doing a certified ID.
100%. I think those things can be looked at. I think, industry needs to be careful not to extrapolate rules that they may have that potentially apply to internal procurement processes, and also in terms of a small business coming to do work with me. Let's not extrapolate. Let's create rules that are specific and responsive to the needs of a small business. I mean, we all agree that small business is important. Big business agrees that small business is important. As you have pointed out, our government certainly believes that it's important.
The government says it is important.
Well, they do say it's important, and you are right. I think we will progress once we start aligning what we are saying with what we are doing.
John, right. Is there a room for an SBI to create a hub of some sorts where small businesses could feed off to do these administrative things, so that if I'm a construction guy, I don't have to be belabored by these things, and there could be an organization from which I buy these services and it's centralized.
Yeah. So we are a two-stream organization. We're a think tank. We contribute cutting-edge research to ideas and encourage evidence-based policy making. And then we have a do tank. Do tank is the chamber movement, the 70 chambers that we represent, and over 110,000 small businesses. Yes, two opportunities exist to streamline, to make the lives of entrepreneurs and small business owners quite pleasant. Our preference is that our SME owners must spend more time with their customers, clients, and employees instead of running around with compliance. That can be taken away if we created pools of excellence around back office functions such as compliance, IT, HR, bookkeeping, accounting, and those are not areas of competition. Those are areas of collaboration. Rams, the second part that I think we really have to embrace is what can be done by technology, which takes away the human intervention, which creates mistakes and opportunities for corruption and other forms of malfeasance. If we embrace technology for IR, I think we will make the lives of these rock stars of the economy infinitely pleasant and better and easier.
Which is your space, right? Digital transformation is what you guys have been into. And are you seeing an upward surge of people improving at least their returns on the back of new digital interventions?
Yes, certainly. I mean, it contributes significantly, right? It was basically forced upon anybody really who's doing business when we had the hard lockdown during the pandemic. The only way you could actually stay in business and continue to trade was to digitize.
Yes.
That was always important, because if I'm a small business, I need to expand my market. My market can't be confined to, my location.
Yes.
And technology enables exactly that. If I'm able to create an online presence for my store, I suddenly have, almost infinite customer base, in the sense that I probably cannot service everybody who might be interested in my service. But that in itself will unlock even more growth in the small business sector.
Jeremy, far from it that I am going to be accused of being a government critic. In fairness, they launched a bounce back scheme that was administered by banks and financial institutions for companies and SMEs who need to recover financially after the pandemic. What have we seen from that? Has it helped a lot of SMEs? Is it something that can be improved, reiterated?
Yes, the bounce back scheme has taken a few shapes and forms. Although in theory the intention was very good, I don't think we've been very successful on the delivery and execution thereof. I think for a few reasons. One is the awareness to business owners, access to information, making it easy for them to apply the processes, even using technology to do so. I think would have been a good benefit. And then lastly, also the terms and conditions were a bit onerous for entrepreneurs and SMEs. So if we're going to help them, let's help them well, if I can put it that way. It should be of a concessionary nature. And even the way in which they want to shape it today to assist with the load shedding challenges that entrepreneurs have, it should also be concessionary of nature. So meaning it should not be an expensive form of funding. It should not be onerous terms and conditions. It should be easily accessible and quick turnaround in terms of process and money in the bank. So to date, not too much traction. I think of the 15 billion that was provided, the last stats I saw, only about 77 million disbursed, which is a bit disappointing. I think having that pool of capital available for SMEs and them not being able to tap into it is not very good.
Is there a risk in all of us asking for more to be done for SMEs? Is there a risk of making them dependent on government, making them dependent on other people rather than them doing their own work? I mean, by definition, entrepreneurs are hustlers. There are people who go out there and make things happen for themselves, Jeremy.
Yes, I don't think there's a risk, because the challenges that they are faced have been temporary of nature. COVID has come and gone. Load shedding is here in the present. There are plans to reduce it. So it does help, and we've seen that with many clients, many SMEs, that temporary relief does carry them over to which they can then continue and sustain themselves. Unfortunately, when these kinds of challenges come, they don't have the financial reserves or the financial muscle to be able to carry these losses for sustained periods of time. So the relief, if packaged well, can actually really benefit entrepreneurs in ensuring their businesses are sustained. And in addition, the impact of ensuring that job losses are minimized is another very important aspect.
John, a friend of mine shares a story that he loves so much, that he did a job for a government department, and 2 years after the job, he received a check. At the time, he received a check in the post, and he couldn't remember what the check was about. They had not paid him for 2 years. He had forgotten about it.
Proceeds of money laundering.
So, President speaks about, this Business Act, that's kind of the amendment to the Business Act, speaks about making sure that we get rid of red tape. There's a new, Sipo Nkosi was appointed to make things any better for SMEs. Are they any better? I would have loved to have him here, but, I doubted we will find him.
You could. You can go through me. Okay. He's my chairman. I think there is a difference that is the stuff that's happening. Obviously, this stuff, the problem was not created overnight. It will take a long time to streamline the red tape and to get rid of the red tape and start doing what we should be doing, rolling out the red carpet treatment for our SME owners. So there is work, and I hope soon rather than later, that office will be communicating, the presidency will be communicating some kinds of milestones they've reached and progress they've made. The president made references to the permitting system, for example, the work permits. It can be done. Rems, if I could, through you, address the questions that you have addressed to Jeremy. We need help as the SME ecosystem, small business owners, entrepreneurs, but the help must be fast. We cannot spend months designing solutions. Mm-hmm. This is where the private sector moves faster than government. The Bounce Back 2 scheme now has yet to be implemented, maybe towards the end of the year. And I know that the Department of Small Business Development is also working on something. Now, I'm quite nervous about National Treasury and the Department of Small Business working separately on something almost similar intervention. We have been interacting with the National Treasury, and I think they are mindful and are alive to the problems that are facing small business owners right now. Like what Jeremy was talking about is when the scheme was first introduced a year ago, interest rates were not as high as they are, and they are not going to go down anytime soon. So we have to tailor products that first are concessionary in nature. The most effective scheme that we had during COVID was signing up checks to households and families. Yeah. It was easier, it got to people on time, and it averted a humanitarian disaster of hunger and poverty. We need to be implementing something similar with the small business relief schemes.
Maybe a minister of disbursement? Let's talk about COVID then, now that we've spoken about COVID. Look, that 2-year period was a horrible period. We came to a point where other businesses came to a standstill and died. Mm-hmm. And others are battling to come back to where they are. I mean, we've heard of companies that could not even comply during that time because they did not know what to do. They were stuck. Yes. Right now, we now find ourselves in this new period where the pandemic is behind us, but the effects of the pandemic are still with us. What are your reflections on the impact of this thing on SMEs?
No, it's been an absolute disaster from a small business perspective, without a doubt, right? Firstly, I mean, the pandemic was prolonged, right? A 2-year period is quite extensive, where your ability to trade is, severely restricted. Certainly we needed to deal decisively with the pandemic, but there's no denying that there were some unintended consequences of some of the rules that were put in place to deal with the pandemic. It was far easier for established businesses to comply with the rules that were put in place to enable trade. And that is another, impact that, means that a small business was more severely impacted. We spoke about reserves, right? The smaller the business, the less likely that I've got reserves to keep paying people effectively who are not working.
Or even just rent.
Yeah, they're home and I've got rent to pay and all of those things. Eventually, the business stops functioning. And we might be out of a state of disaster, certainly, but the recovery, unfortunately, will take much longer. I must reestablish my business. I must re-educate customers that I am here. A lot of things have changed during that 2-year period. And I almost have to re-establish my business. If really, I had to close it down, probably I had to terminate leases because I can't sustain them if my business is not operating. So it will take a while.
Jeremy, I'm about to take a break, but I need to ask you this question that, the Department of Small Business in 2020, I think, stepped in to mitigate the impact, and they brought in debt relief fund and growth and resilience facility. Yet, somebody said, with a lot of money that's not been spent, could it have been easy for the department to write a check and write off the debts that were suffered by a lot of SMEs, especially the ones that were showing amazing promise and they were just affected by this pandemic?
Yes, I think there's two elements to your question. The first one is funding SMEs is not an easy task. Okay, it's not as easy as funding a corporate. All the information's available and so on. So understanding an SME from a funding perspective is very important, and it's a very specialized area of funding in my view. I would be hesitant to say, let's just write off debt. I would say, let's make it easy for them to operate, survive, and repay you, even if we need to be a bit more patient. Because in that manner, anybody receiving funding that they need to repay is going to handle that with a bit more care and responsibility. So I would be more inclined to say, create packages, offerings in which it makes them easier for them to repay, rather than just writing off the debt completely. However, there have been some casualties along the way, so one needs to look at each one on its own merit. And if that arrangement meant the survivability or not of that business, maybe there would be some element in motivating what you suggested. But I would be more inclined to say, provide the funding on concessionary terms, be patient, even more patient than usual in allowing their businesses to get back on track, to grow, and then enforce the obligation for them to start repaying.
John, if I ran a retail store pre-pandemic, research shows that post-pandemic, the fee through the doors would have dropped to 37%. That's a 63% drop. It's a reality that I'm messed up. I could have used a stronger word if this were not a business and a family consumer product, right? How then am I expected to bounce back from this?
Out of the dark cloud that was COVID, which decimated tens of thousands of small businesses in South Africa, there was something creative, innovative that came out. People pivoted towards digitalization, and they bounced back. The most disturbing thing, of course, is that they were not enabled by any of the first responders, so to speak. They did so despite the first responders themselves. They just find more imaginative ways of delivering their products. And I think the lesson from here is twofold. The first part of the lesson is that we need to prepare for the next crisis. And we could be living through that crisis right now. And I doubt if we are ready. The second part of that is that we have to prepare small businesses during these times to become good corporate citizens, so that by the time the next crisis occurs, they are ready to be assisted and we know where to find them.
I didn't know I would get so animated speaking to the suits. I speak to SMEs most of my time. There is so much to unpack, but do stay with us. We will be back shortly after this break.